Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
Mike Freeman.
What's happening, Tyler Gould?
Are you ready to break down the difference between expectation and expectancy?
Because man, you say breakdown. I kind of want to go like Stephen A. Smith or like, I want to go my boy SVP and like break down some film footage.
Well, here, oddly enough, attached to the conversation about expectation and expectancy is some film footage.
This analogy will blow people's mind, right?
I agree, man. I totally agree.
So Kurt Francom is spitting wisdom on our show.
Yeah, so we have Kurt Francom from Leading Saints podcast, not just a podcast. It's a community. It is an online magazine.
He's doing some great work.
Stuff. Right. So he talks about leading, about principles of leadership, and I tell you, tonight we had some great discussions, not only about principles of leadership, but just about how can we come to the place where we're fully accepting of ourselves.
Yeah. And how can we come to a point where we are trying our hardest to fully understand what the gospel of Jesus Christ should mean in our life, as far as influence our own actions, the actions of others, the way we treat other people. He talks about this culture. Come on. Kurt, talking about culture and the things that are getting in the way of good culture. And it doesn't matter what kind of doctrine you have.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what kind of doctrine you have in your personal individual life, in your life as a church group. If you've got negative culture, you're done.
Yeah, I think, look, no matter where you fall on the religious spectrum, and no matter what denomination you may call your home, there are some things talked about here tonight that are just principles of hope and principles of love and principles of peace, man.
Well, and the things and the principles that he's kind of come to gained, he says, a nuanced understanding of, he's gained through conversation. He's gained through the exact model that we've laid out, and the time that we spent having these conversations is what's given him the insight that he shares with us tonight. And it's powerful, folks. Like, honestly, there's some things here. I'm an old dog and I don't necessarily learn new tricks, but there's some things here that Kurt shares that honestly opened up my eyes to see things that I got a pretty good understanding of, to see things in a different light.
Yeah, I think if you're struggling with anything in your life, right? You could plug in anything. Listen tonight, and you're going to hear some nuggets. They're going to help you feel like there's a path forward.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is, the nuggets came from people that are struggling with the thing you might be struggling with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Kurt is just coming to us bearing some lessons that people have taught him along the way. And he drops them at our feet saying, hey, Mike, hey, Tyler, what are you going to do with these things?
Yeah. It was
a couple books, right? We got some homework.
We got some homework. We got some homework. We just got work to do after spending a couple hours with Kurt Francom.
Well, and really that work is where it's always been. It's with ourselves.
Yeah.
That Carl Rogers quote, get out of here, right?
Get out. Yeah. Get out of here.
We accept ourselves. There's amazing things that'll come.
Yeah. I think that, if you don't spend a lot of time looking at show notes, this is one of those episodes where you might want to spend a little bit of time checking out the show notes because Kurt drops some serious nuggets that we'll have prepared for you in those notes. But
yeah, I can see some people scrambling to hit the pause button and back it up 15 when they hear some of the things Kurt shares out, right? Like, oh shoot, I need to be writing this down like Mike and Tyler tell me to do every week.
Yeah, that's right.
We say, grab a pad of paper, grab a rocking chair, pull up a chair, spend a couple hours with our guests, and then let's do something about it.
Let's do something, man. You know what? I'm fired up after tonight. I just feel like there's so much good.
There's battles to fight.
Shared. There's battles to fight, man.
There's battles to fight. There's adventures to live, and there's beauties to love.
That's it. So look, pull up a chair, get out that pad of paper, dust it off, sharpen up the pencil, take a few notes, and you know what? Let's do something about it. Learn something tonight with your time with Kurt Francom on The Richest Men in Town.
Tyler Gould, let me ask you this question.
Okay, let's hear it, man.
What I'm about to show you is a banana chocolate chip cookie.
Okay.
So many questions about banana chocolate chip cookie, but here's my take on this.
Okay.
This is one of the things my wife does best. Like if you're to come up with a top 5 list of things Kelly Freeman makes that is delicious, this might be the number one thing. So let me ask you, Tyler Gould.
Yeah.
What is the best thing that Ricky Gould makes?
Oh, come on now. Golly.
We can
think about
delete
that,
the
man.
long pause.
Yeah, that's true. We could edit this all the way around, right?
Oh, we can edit it all around.
Yeah, that's true. That's good.
We can even come in with an engaging conversation later on and plug it in at the front. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. There's so many options. So let me think about that. There's a lot of things that my wife makes. I'm not a huge dessert guy, to be honest with you. So I'm not really like, if they're there, I'm going to eat them. Let's just say that. Like if they're there, they'll be consumed. But if I had a choice, I wouldn't probably say, hey, make some cookies tonight. You know what I mean? Yeah. And let me just clarify that too, because if I ever said, hey, make some cookies tonight, like, that wouldn't happen.
I did have a coworker express concern about my diet today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
A little concern about Mike, do you eat fruit?
You're like, I'm having a banana right now, for crying out loud.
What's your take on vegetables? Are you like allergic to vegetables or what?
So I'm gonna answer that question because there's a lot of things that my wife makes really well, but she makes this really good pizza that I love. It's fantastic. It's homemade. It's like from scratch. It's amazing. So I'm a big fan of that, and she makes a couple other dishes that I'm a huge fan of, and
on the pizza front, I don't know if you are a pizza oven guy, but I kind of want one. I went to a party once, and they had this pizza oven in the corner, and I was like, 7 minutes, I had a pizza in my hand.
Yeah, I actually got together with some people, some friends, and at a place, and they had a pizza oven, and that's what we did. We made pizzas that night, and it was fantastic.
Do you do pineapple?
Yeah, I mean, look,
Have we had this conversation? This is a question of the soul.
I'm not a huge fan of the pineapple on the pizza. I'm not a huge fan. I will eat it. Again, I'm a man that will eat almost anything. So if it's there, I will eat it. But I don't seek it out. My kids, however, love the pineapple on the pizza.
Well, that's kind of how I feel about olives. I don't seek out olives, but if they're there and they get in the way, they're going down.
Yeah. I'm a fan of olives. Yeah.
I could take them or leave them, honestly. I'll leave them more than take them. But if somebody's making my stuff, which really never happens.
But we just talking like, yeah, exactly. We talking green olives or black olives? What are we talking here?
I'm talking like, you're in your Jersey Mike's and you want some olives on this.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they're just trying to put something on there to put something on there at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't even know if Jersey Mike's does all those.
I don't either, but
I'm trying to think of the last time I was in a Subway.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think it was the Bush administration.
Yeah. And they put cucumbers on there. I'm like, how many tasteless vegetables do you have will you put on my sandwich?
See, like, I'm a cucumber guy. I'm a cucumber guy.
I like cucumbers too, but not on my sandwich, man.
Not on my sandwich. Get out of here.
It's unnecessary.
Yellow mustard, honey mustard.
Yellow. And even spicy mustard.
Like spicy brown.
Yeah, oh yeah. Let's do that all day.
Like golden spicy brown mustard.
Yeah, like some Grey Poupon. You know what I mean? Some of that.
All right, you're grilling a steak on the barbecue. What are you putting on the steak? Nothing, how are you treating that steak?
A little salt and pepper, man.
That's it.
That's it. You got to enjoy the flavor of the steak.
Get out of here with the sauces. Get out of here with the A1.
No sauces. However, if my steak is tough, like jerky, then give me that sauce. We're saucing it up, man.
Oh, if it's tough, you just go ranch.
So I got Ricky might not like this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. It's my podcast.
She's not here,
right? Yeah, she's not here.
She's not here.
Yeah, what is she going to say, right? So for Father's Day, she had planned a really spectacular meal, really spectacular, and part of that meal included tri-tip that was to be barbecued, right? That's tricky. It's tricky. You know, you got to get it right. If it can go south pretty quick. So anyway, heart's in the right place. She's got a million things going, insisting that I'm not involved in the process. I appreciated that. But she had a lot of things to take care of. That tri-tip got a little done, but it tasted good. We're eating it. And
is it like National Lampoon Christmas Vacation? Like
it yeah. No, not quite that bad. We're eating it. It was good. But my 11-year-old is sitting next to me at the dinner table eating, and she said, "Yeah, this tastes like beef jerky." And I told her, I said, that is not a compliment. Just so you know.
Here's the trick. Here's why Father's Day, Mother's Day, that's my fear, right? My fear is a house full of people and I'm standing over the grill.
Yeah. And
everyone's dependent on me crushing it on that grill.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Usually I got Round Table on backup.
I was just going to say, you got Uber Eats in your back pocket,
But those Sunday holidays.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you're in a spot, like it's you or you.
It's you or Eggo waffles. You know what I mean? Like all the way around. Here we go.
Hey, I don't know when's the last time you had an Eggo, but they're not the same that they used to be. They're not the same.
There's always Eggos in my freezer because my kids love the Eggo waffles. And I have had an Eggo waffle in the past 90 days. And I'll be honest, they may not be the same, but there's something about an Eggo waffle that you just can't go wrong with, man.
I can't get one that isn't freezer burnt.
Oh,
by the time I get after the Eggo, it's got all that icicle, like it's been,
Yeah,
that's rough.
That is rough.
That's rough. Who do we got on the show tonight, Tyler?
So tonight, Mike Freeman, we have Kurt Francom on the show with us tonight, and maybe to some people that sounds vaguely familiar. Maybe some people are super psyched because that sounds very familiar. But Mike, why don't you fill them in on what Kurt Francom's doing these days? Kurt's
doing some things. I'm looking forward to our time together with Kurt. I want to do a shout out again to Wes Franks for he's our chief guest recruiter at the richest men in town.
Director of guest recruitment.
Yes. But Kurt is running a thing called Leading Saints. And like us, right? Richest Men in Town is not just a podcast. Leading Saints has a podcast, but they are a community, right? Yeah. They're a community, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of the good things that Kurt's up to. Kurt lives in Utah. Kurt actually served his mission here in California, man.
In the Roseville mission?
Sacramento, just to our south.
Okay. I love it.
Yeah. So it'll be fun to get his perspective and his take on things. I think he's a dad of 3. So we'll figure out what life's teaching him these days.
Let's do it, man. Let's learn something tonight.
All right, I'm gonna let Kurt Francom in.
We'll open the doors and we'll do our all as usual, our gracious welcome that we do. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we're pretty formal.
Very, very formal. Very, very formal. That's right.
Kurt Francom, man.
Hey.
Welcome to the richest men in town. How are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
I'm doing
Fantastic.
wonderful.
We're jumping in here, huh?
We're excited. We're excited that you're with us tonight. We've kind of been breaking down some very important questions tonight.
Kurt,
right.
How long have you been married?
I've been married. We just hit 15 years this year.
All right.
So,
Congratulations.
Well, congratulations. Man. Hey, we are going to put you right on the spot. All right.
Oh boy. It's a right question. This wasn't on the list you sent me.
Not on the list.
It's not on the list.
While we're talking tonight, I'm going to be muting my mic, enjoying my wife's banana chocolate chip cookies. This is probably one of the best things that she makes. So, Kurt, my question to you, I threw it over to Tyler as well. What's the best thing your wife makes?
You mean my vegan wife? Oh wow, this is
yeah.
Good. Let's go with that. Let's go with that.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Like food wise, it's got to be a food or a dish. Is that
dessert food?
Okay.
Yeah.
You take it anywhere you want to take it,
and we can edit long pauses. Edit long pauses, right? She's not listening. If you get it wrong, you can even call us back and say, "I got to re-record that spot."
All right. Well, man, she makes this thing. She grew up on a potato farm in Idaho, so we have this dish that's called potato nachos, completely vegan. All right. It's great, and little potatoes with some, it's basically French fries, but with things sprinkled on top. But we call it potato nachos, and it's delicious. Nice. And I'll have a better answer for you at 2 a.m. when I wake up and say, "Oh, I should have said that."
Can I ask you really quick on the vegan thing? Are you with her on this?
Not really. It's probably saved me 20 pounds of weight just because I don't have to worry about smothered burritos with sweet pork showing up on the dinner table. So. But
I love me some sweet pork, dude.
I am I haven't eaten meat in about 2 years, but that's sort of a different thing.
Okay. I like it, man.
Yeah. I don't know how long that'll last. Sometimes I see, somebody make a brisket and I think, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. But,
okay. Well, we have eternal questions of the soul that we try to run people through, kind of a sifter, if you will.
Yeah, that's
right. Pineapple on pizza. You good with that?
I don't consider it like a crime against humanity like some people, but I'm not necessarily ordering that. But
okay.
All right, I'm with you on that, Kurt. 100%.
Eggo waffles.
Like up or down, sure. I prefer the real thing, homemade from scratch.
Peanut butter on pancakes or waffles.
Nah. Again, I guess I don't. I'm not passionate about it or anything, but no, there's so many other options to go for.
That's true. I mean, now, granted, the peanut butter on the waffles segment of our audience is completely alienated.
Yeah, that's fine.
Stop it. They are a passionate group.
Yes, they are. Right. Yes.
Are you a creamy or chunky peanut butter guy?
I think I go chunky for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Twizzlers or Red Vines?
Oof, Red Vines.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. We're making progress here, Kurt.
We're gonna have fun tonight.
I think Kurt. I think you are. You're in good company.
I hope so. I feel comfortable. So
okay, good.
Thanks for the softball questions to warm me up here.
Yeah.
No worries. We Tyler are the ones that should be nervous because Kurt does what we do, just does it a lot better.
Yeah,
oh yeah,
that's true. Yeah, this is very true.
Do you want me to coach as we go here? Is that what you're saying?
Just give us the signal, no, a thumbs up, thumbs down. Just go that way.
So the story goes, Wes Franks was listening to your podcast. Wes Franks is a friend of ours, friend of the program, and he reached out to us and turned us on to your podcast, and we got to listen into some of your episodes and thought, this guy is all about better.
Yeah, and I try to be.
Yeah. And that's kind of where we're at, right? We pattern our work after, trying to find out what that rich life looks like. And so as we started listening to your work, now your work is actually beyond just a podcast. So let's start there. Kurt. Talk to us a little bit about Leading Saints and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so Leading Saints is a nonprofit organization that I'm the executive director, and it's my day-to-day job is running this organization. And we are a nonprofit focused on helping Latter-day Saints be better prepared to lead. As you both know, in our faith tradition, it's a lay clergy. So you could be a mechanic Monday through Friday and get called as the bishop of your ward, and they'll hand you a handbook and a swift pat on the back, and away you go.
And a binder, maybe.
If you're lucky. If the previous bishop was over 60, you'll get a binder.
And you got to go tackle somebody to get a key to the building because nobody gives those up.
Or they'll give you a link to some Google Drive folder. It's all there, man. That's all you need.
All you need is right there on that one sheet.
So yeah, a lay clergy. So we try and just have discussions around leadership and try and create content around leadership thought from, I don't know what it is about our people, us Latter-day Saints, but we've had some rock stars as far as leadership development goes. Stephen Covey and Liz Wiseman and Greg McEwen and all these individuals that, they're out there, at least some of them are out there, preaching, leadership into corporations and companies. And so we have a strong tradition of leadership thought. And I think it's worth talking about in the context of the church. So that's what we do when we have a podcast. I think most people, if you asked most people in our audience, like, what is Leading Saints? They say, oh, it's a podcast, but it's actually, we're a nonprofit that has a podcast, and we do live events, virtual summits. We have online magazine, I guess you can call it, with thousands of articles of different people's perspectives all around leadership in the context of being a Latter-day Saint. So that's what we are.
So Tyler, basically Kurt's doing our dream job.
Yeah, I love it,
right?
man.
It is a dream job.
Exactly,
absolutely. Yeah. I pinch myself every day.
You have not had the opportunity, have you, to talk to Greg McEwen like in person?
Oh yeah, I've interviewed him twice. Yeah, he's great.
Mike is dream guest guy, right?
Oh
here.
yeah, I can hook you up. Yeah,
like that guy. That guy. Great. Essentialism is the first book, Kurt, that I ever read, closed, and turned back to page 1.
Oh yeah,
and started reading again.
Easy. Yeah, fantastic book. Yeah, he's doing some great stuff. And
so, how long has Leading Saints been around?
So it started technically in 2010. It was just like a blog. I bought a domain name and started blogging, and it was just sort of a hobby blog, And then by 2014, the podcast started. 2016, we became a nonprofit, and ever since then, we've been just growing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Kurt, what was the thing that led you to this idea of putting together content about leadership, and specifically as it pertains to the Latter-day Saints?
Yeah. Well, just like all great ideas, you try and scratch your own itch, right? And so I was, when I came from my mission, I went to a young single adult ward, and I was there a few months, and I got called as the Elders Quorum president. And this was like my first experience in leadership. Like, I mean, I've been a district leader on my mission, but that's almost pretend leadership. I had like 3 companionships, and I'd call them and collect numbers, and that's about it, right? And so I'd never experienced this type of formal leadership before. And so I made all the mistakes. I mean, I had the guilt trip lesson about home teaching. I didn't know how to delegate. And I had like 100+ elders in this quorum, where technically you're only supposed to have 96. But I mean, in a YSA ward, it was mammoth. And I had no clue what I was doing. But, this is one of those experiences where they ask you to serve in this role. And it's like, I'll serve, and I'm going to do a good job. Like, I don't know what every other Elders Quorum president, I don't know what their problem was, but I'm actually going to try, if they would have just try. Right. And so, but yeah, I felt, I stepped in every pitfall and tried really hard. And I actually met my wife in that ward. And so we got engaged and obviously moved out when we got married. And I just left that experience feeling like, I really tried hard at that. Like I remember standing in front of the board and writing on the board 39%. Like that. Look at it, everybody. That's our home teaching percentage. Look at it, right? And then I went to work And I was like, if they didn't show up to elders quorum, I'd put their home teaching route in an envelope and put a stamp on that thing, and no excuse. You got it. I know you got it. I should have tried certified mail. Then I'd have a receipt.
Yeah, there you go.
And I remember I tried so hard, just like rearrange. It must have been the way I had done the routes. If I could just get the companionships right, then suddenly this is going to work. And I remember that next month looking at, after all this hard work, looking at the numbers, and it was 38%. Like it dropped a percentage. And I'm like, what on earth? And so, we left that ward, and I just felt like, man, I really tried hard and nothing, I didn't even move the needle. Like, what's the problem here? Right. And so we got married, moved into a ward. I served in the bishopric for a couple of years, and then that bishop got released, and I got called as the high priest group leader. And I thought, well, here I go again. Like, why even try? Like, what's the point here?
It's a sleepier bunch,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everybody's the age of my dad or older. I was 26 years old, high priest group leader here, and so. But I couldn't understand why I could walk into a Barnes & Noble and there'd be bookshelves full of life leadership, business leadership, family leadership, like so much research about leadership, but nobody was talking about it in the context of the church. Now, of course, we have what we call leadership meetings, but there's no leadership talk that's going there. It's just another meeting where we talk about the gospel or somebody speaks or whatever.
Or they write 39% on the board. And
yeah, that's right. That's right.
And yell it and throw things at you.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I thought, nobody's really engaging with this research, these principles in the context of the church. So I thought, well, I'm not a leadership, guru or anything, but maybe I could create a platform to bring those gurus or those experts to, and at least start talking about these things. So I went and I bought the domain name Leading LDS. That was the name before it was cool to change your name to Leading Saints. And I would just like read a book by like Dan Pink or Liz Wiseman or, all these thought leaders out there talking about leadership. And then I would just apply the principles to church leadership, and I'd write up a blog post about it. And so that sort of got some momentum in 2010. Then by 2014 is when the podcasting was becoming more popular, and I thought, I could do that. I'm comfortable in front of Mike, so let's try that. And that's sort of when it really got some traction.
So now, so where you're at right now, break it down for me. What does the Francom family look like right now?
Yeah, so I am the father of 3 kids. My wife is from Blackfoot, Idaho, grew up on a potato farm, and she moved down here for massage school. And we met in that ward, and then we have a 9-year-old girl, a 6-year-old boy, and a 1-year-old girl. So that's our crew for now. And we live in Stansbury Park, Utah, which is just out by Tooele, which is just west of Salt Lake.
So are you from born and raised in Utah?
Yeah, I grew up in West Valley City. So
West Valley City.
That's right.
And you served your mission in Sacramento, California, is that right?
Sacramento, California, Spanish speaking. So,
right.
Which pretty much feels like a different state compared to where you guys are at, but which it may be someday. I don't know.
Well, Mike and I, we have this state covered. I am in San Diego, and okay. Mike is in Redding, California.
Oh, perfect. Nice.
So he's up kind of in the just north of your stomping grounds as a missionary. So.
Yeah, we're Roseville, California mission, and you're Sacramento right to the south.
Yeah, all the disobedient missionaries go to Roseville. I don't know if you knew this, but I don't know why we do this as missionaries. We have to have like a nemesis, and that was our nemesis was Roseville. Like they don't even part their hair, and we part our hair. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I will say we have a lot of partless missionaries up here.
Oh boy!
I noticed that actually when I visit. It's disturbing,
right?
It's
disturbing. Yeah, it is disturbing, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a mark, right? Maybe that's a mark.
That is.
Well, so how long ago did you serve a mission?
So I served my mission 2001 to 2003.
All right, so you'll be happy to know, right? Sacramento, California, is a home of a temple.
Yeah. It was announced before I got my call and never was built until after.
So, really?
Okay. And word on the street is it's the busiest little temple in the church.
Oh, really? Well, of course, all of my converts, they're just lining up,
flooding the gates. Yes.
Yeah. That's cool. That's awesome.
Well, I applaud you I actually feel like I'm talking to somebody, Tyler, who's a couple of steps down the trail that we're hiking on right now.
Just
right?
A few steps. Just
a few. Yeah. I'm sure you'll whiz by me any day.
Right.
We've been doing this a year. It started out much the same with the blog. We are not obsessed, but we love the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome.
We love the lessons that George Bailey and the study of his life teaches us. And we would get together, old man football, pre-blown out ACLs, and we would talk about these things. And then we started putting some things down on blogs. And one day we bought the domain Richest Men in Town, and we bought a couple cheap mics, and here we are. Now 1 year, nice. 1 year in, and we're nipping at 15,000. Like, you're going to put us over, Kurt.
Okay,
you're going to put us over that 15,000 downloads. And we'll be excited to see.
You're lucky. My mom enjoys listening to podcasts, so she'll definitely download this one. So.
We are, my mother-in-law is my biggest fan, biggest fan, I think, and we are huge in Dublin, Ireland. So shout out to our
shout out to our devoted listeners in Dublin.
Is it mates?
I don't know. Don't we may have to edit that out. I'm not sure if that's offensive to them or not. So
yeah, that's your base, man. Don't offend them.
That's right.
So what did you think when Wes Franks reaches out to you and says, "Hey, we've got a podcast called The Richest Men in Town, and we would love to have you on"?
I love I love the concept, and I'm always intrigued to to just see how the other guy does it with podcasting. So I was happy to say yes, and the signing bonus didn't hurt, but
we are generous with that. We need to rethink that, but
you got cases and cases of swag coming your way.
That's right. No, I'm excited to be here, and I love the concept. Growing up, my mom was always sitting us down in front of the TV around Christmas and watching It's a Wonderful Life, and first in black and white, then they colorized it somehow. I'm not sure how that worked, but I great. They just don't make movies like that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I like how you said, listen to how the other guys do it, because that's actually our approach. This whole podcast, the idea is we're calling people in and learning how other people are living their lives, right? Hoping that we can glean something from them. And it's a selfish venture. We've got kids. We've actually both got kids wearing name tags right now, which is kind of
cool. That's
kind of
awesome.
wild. So Tyler's son is serving in Colorado. I've got a daughter. Thursdays are kind of magical, Tyler, because I get to talk to her right before I jump into Richest Men in Town. So Grace Freeman is serving in Philly.
That's fun.
And guess what we just sent her, Tyler?
What'd you send her? Oh, wait. Chocolate chip banana cookies.
No. Oh. Close, though. Baked bear.
Baked bear. You did. All right.
To launch the official start of summer, we sent her some baked bear goodness from down your way. Baked Bear, Kurt, is this amazing place. Got your first option is what kind of ice cream. Your second option is what do you want to surround this ice cream with? They got donuts and brownies and cookies and I wonder why my coworker is concerned about my diet, Tyler.
Yeah. Well, you're a better father than I, because I would have simply sent my son a picture of me eating the baked bear. That would have been what I sent him.
So this podcast, we're not big like Kurt, so we don't have official sponsors. So we just throw things out there. So this episode, we're episode 60.
I think so. Yeah.
Episode 60 will be brought to you by Baked Bear.
Wow.
Right? Baked Bear, free shipping nationwide.
So
especially to your house to pay for the sponsorship, right?
That's right. So Kurt, you mentioned, you mentioned sitting around the TV at Christmas time watching It's a Wonderful Life. I'm wondering if you can take us back a little bit to growing up and the examples that you saw growing up in your home and siblings and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. So I'm the youngest of four, and I'm the typical youngest child that got spoiled and all those things. While my oldest brother complains of tough skins and no snack pack or anything like that. But born and raised in West Valley City, and very faithful Orthodox family. I mean, there was no question as to whether you were going to church on Sunday, and and it wasn't overdone by any means. I mean, I enjoyed church and wanted to go, and my mom was a school teacher, and she was actually the day I started kindergarten at my elementary school, she started teaching at my elementary school. Wow. And so I was always Mrs. Francom's son in the halls there, and
no pressure, cool right? Yeah. No pressure there.
Yeah. The problem was when I started feeling sick at school, I didn't get to go to the sick room. I had to go to my mom's room and sit in her hard chair and sort of just moan. But but it was great. And my my dad had worked for a steel company as a credit manager, and had that job his whole life. And so just being raised, family home evening was hit and miss, but the gospel was present, and it was encouraged, and testimonies were built, and that was sort of the life I lived.
So how did they do it? What did faith look like? How did your parents convey those things that they believed to you guys? And
it was just maybe those. A lot of times it was seeing my parents serve in church capacities. My earliest memory of church, my father was the bishop, and I just knew he went to church a lot more than I did, and I knew that that was sort of the beginning of there's some commitment here. There's a testimony here that they have a deep conviction of the gospel and what's going on there. So and then just we did I'd hate to paint this picture that we were hitting family home evening every Monday without a problem. It was hit and miss, but we stuck at it. And I, being the youngest and seeing my oldest brother serve a mission, then my sister, and then my next brother, and it was, I was really excited to go on my own mission and be engaged in the gospel that way, and I had deep faith, and I was just so beyond certain and almost to a fault of grasping that certainty as if I had arrived, or I earned that star on my forehead type of thing of a testimony. It was there. It was conviction. And now I appreciate sort of the nuanced views I've been introduced to the gospel and things, and it's enriched my faith. It's seeing that, oh wait, it doesn't just all fit in this pretty box, and it's not all perfect, and that's enriched my faith. So I think those are some of the traits that they instilled just growing up and making their faith obvious.
Yeah. At what point, Kurt, does faith become your own faith? Growing up, right? We see the example of our parents. We've got the older siblings that maybe are doing it or not doing it in some cases, right? And at what point in time, is there a time where you can point to where you say, gosh, this was a sort of a defining moment for me in my own faith?
I don't know if there's like a specific event per se, but I would say definitely that transitioning into the mission was, man, if I had had a test of my life, it was at that point, because growing up, especially in Utah, lots of friends that were in the church, it was, it becomes sort of a cool thing, in the right groups. And, I ran around with good kids and whatnot. And so it wasn't much of a question of, there wasn't the question of whether I was going to go to weekday activities for young men or scouting, or because all my friends were there and it was like easy. Right. And then going on my mission, I remember I was like so excited to go on a mission. Like it was almost, I was like an annoying kid, and I was younger in my grade. So I got my mission call later than all my friends. And so they had all gone. It was finally my turn. And I was just bouncing off the walls, packing my suitcase, excited to go, got to the MTC, the old cry room, everybody's crying. I'm just smiling. Right. And I'm so excited to start this mission. And it wasn't probably 12 hours later on day 2 where the reality of my life set in. It's like, do you really understand how long 2 years is? This is it. And, you're not used to this life. And so time is going so slow for me, on day 2 and day 3. And I'm pretty sure it was day 4 or 5. I just had a breakdown. I was sitting, one of the teachers, my MTC teachers, like took me out, and they were taking everybody out, just sort of quizzing him on different things as we're, attempting to learn Spanish. And I just lost it. I was in a room alone with him and I just like lost it, bawling my eyes out, just saying this is not what I envisioned. This, this chorus of call to serve him. Like this is not, they don't show this in the videos. Right. And to the point where I literally couldn't eat. Like, I mean, I think it was, if I went on a mission today, they probably would have sent me home with some stress and anxiety issues that way. But it was for about 2 weeks. Like I literally, like I'd put food in my mouth and I'd chew it. I could not convince my body to swallow it. It was the strangest thing. I was just so overly stressed. Right. And, but I just took it one day at a time, and it got to about week 2 or 3 and I sort of settled in, and I was there for about 8 weeks, and I was feeling pretty good. I was making friends with the other missionaries in my district, and it was great. And then I got, I flew out to Sacramento. Suddenly I'm in this strange apartment, and that transition happens again, and the anxiety sets in, and, crying myself to sleep in a way that makes sure my companion doesn't hear me, type of thing. Right. And it was like double the stress. And I was just like, I don't know if I can do this, and it literally was simply my pride that kept me out there. Like I couldn't understand how I could even begin to start a conversation of maybe this is a good place for me. And I'm so grateful. I just, ideally, you hope that there's better reasons to keep missionaries out there. And those reasons came, about, month 3, month 4, then it's like, okay, I'm getting used to this. And then I was rolling on it. And by the time I got to the end of my mission, and I remember this being month 20 of my mission. And I can't even remember my life before the mission. Like, I'm just sort of like, haven't I always been a missionary? And then I saw Elder Muffet. He was in my apartment getting trained, and I could see it in his eyes. I'm like, oh, I've been there. What? And I remember I invited him, why don't you come with me today? We're going to exchange companions, and Elder Muffet's going to come with me. And I remember just driving with him and just like pulling over to the side of the road and just being like, I turned to him, I said, it sucks, doesn't it? And he's just like, yeah. But I just like, it was such a grace moment for me, where as I was articulating to him, like, this is like, I say I'm going home in a few months, but this is my home. Like Sacramento is just where I live and where I function, and these experiences I have, like, this is my home. And it was as if like the God like parted the veil a little bit and said, do you remember like why I was encouraging you so much? You remember those things you went through? Like, it was all worth it. So these were those moments, like that mission was my moment of like, okay, I'm in this. Like I not that was a traumatic moment or anything, but for me, just being a, naive kid from a very privileged home, in West Valley City, Utah, like it took me out of my comfort zone to the point of saying, this is what you're involved in. And from that point forward, I knew that, I'm willing to sacrifice and give for this mission of the church and for Jesus Christ and his gospel.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, for one. There's a couple things I really like about that. I think that, it's interesting because I've had my son's serving a mission now. My daughter has served a mission and come home. And I think that it's tough. There's a perception that you go and you just own it and it's great and everything is perfect and it's going to happen. And when it doesn't go that way, there's this idea of, well, maybe I wasn't meant for this, or maybe I'm not good enough for this. Yeah. And I think, and I like the idea of just kind of pushing through, right?
Yeah.
You just keep going. And eventually that moment comes where you just have this moment of clarity, like, shoot, you know what? This is where I'm supposed to be. This is happening. And I appreciate that comment, because I think there is a perception, and maybe in the church as a whole, like for missionaries that are preparing themselves, that I got to go and I got to be perfect and I've got to be, check all these boxes. And if I do that, then the mission is a success.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember there's moments of one in particular where, beginning in Sacramento, it was just a tough night, and headed out after dinner. We'd eat dinner at our appointment, and just seeing a picture of the Savior, and just said, you know what, I'm just going to go out tonight and just do it for you. Like, no other reason. And just to feel that the comfort settle in, and like, yeah, that's exactly what I've been wanting you to do this whole time. It's not about what people think of you at home or where you're going through, and just go do it for him. And And ever since then, returning my mission, having nephews go and friends and whatnot, like just being real with them, like just know like there's some cool experiences, but day to day, it's kind of a drag, and you just get through it. I got through it. So when those moments come, just know that I've experienced that too, and I survived. And I remember those letters from my in particular my sister, who went through a similar thing, and just writing, like it was as if she was writing out the same feelings I was experiencing. Like, yeah, that's what I'm feeling too, and that got me through that day or that week.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But I think that approach, I hate to break it to people that may not know this about life yet, but there are times when that description of mission matches up pretty well with being an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
and making a living, raising a family. I mean, there are some things that are amazing, and there are some things that are just not so much.
Yep.
And I think that the beautiful thing about that, though, like when you mention going out to Sacramento as this disruption, is getting you out of this comfort zone. What did that look like after
my mission? Like the disruption?
Yeah. Like how did you take some of those lessons that you learned in Sacramento and apply them to college and beyond after?
Yeah. So, man, there's so many instances coming to mind. Like I went to college after that. I decided to settle for going to the University of Utah because BYU rejected me 3 times. But don't worry, I still have had my BYU season tickets since then. So,
wow,
still BYU fan. So
unconditional.
That's right. I mean, if I went to Notre Dame, I wouldn't become Catholic. I mean, come on. So, but college was really a rough go for me. There's a reason why BYU rejected me 3 times. I probably wasn't up to par with some of their standards, academically. And so I struggled through college, but there's a sort of this expectation, whether I created that in my mind or whether it really existed, that no, you just go to college, you finish. And it was, I mean, I think I took statistics 3 times. My accounting teacher said, why don't you, go down to Salt Lake Community College and take this course and then transfer the credits over. It'll be easier for you. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. So college was not meant for me. Probably if I was to go back in time, I'd probably sit myself down and say, listen, college is great for some people. For you, you should probably just move on with your life and find another way to learn and develop. And because when I did leave college, it was like this awakening of like, oh, so I'm not stupid. I'm just maybe a little bit creative. Okay. Like it, because I felt like the stupid kid for so many years. But then, after college, I got a job for everybody's favorite essential oil company, Young Living. And I worked for Young Living for 3 years in their corporate office and traveled North America, putting on presentations about frankincense and, lavender oil and all these things. So again, not a good fit, but it was a job. And it was sort of my first introduction to a real adult life of having a job. And so I worked there for 3 years, but it was obvious that I was not made for the cubicle life. And I just felt like I was suffocating there. And I knew that if I was going to be happy in life, it would be going out on my own and running my own business or being my own boss. And so I did that. And it was sort of exciting in the beginning, right? Just like the mission, like I'm going on a mission, like I'm starting a business. And boy, it was another reality check, a disruption of God knocking on my door and saying, okay, I'm going to tear you down a little bit, but hang with me here. It'll be worth it, and we'll bring you back. And I started a business partner, and I started a web development company, creating websites for small businesses, and it was okay. I mean, it wasn't like a crazy success, but there were moments that I remember, many in particular, of being on the floor in tears, realizing, wow, this is really tough, and I don't know what I'm going to do, and this isn't, the funds aren't just flowing in, but I don't know. I just figured it out month to month, but what I appreciated about that, again, in that personal development, I so much enjoyed those prayers, each night, of where I sincerely, like, I was hanging on to every blessing He sent me up my way. Like, I just need to get through tomorrow. I just need something, like really hand to mouth type of needs of, I got to pay my rent. I got to pay my mortgage, at the end of this month. And I don't know how I'm going to do it. So here we go. Right. And looking back, I don't know how the math added up. Like, I don't know how I survived, but I did that for 5 years until leading saints sort of was too much of a demand on my time. And then I transitioned to leading saints. But yeah, that was another growing period of my life.
So some of those instances you were talking about with, receiving answers to prayers sounded pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
Some of that financial support, some of those things coming right when you need them. But how would you advise or counsel people to get better at seeing God's hand in their life as a result of prayer? Right? Sometimes we get off our knees and we're wondering, did that work?
Yeah. Well, my mind goes to, the words, one of the last words that Christ said, why hast thou forsaken me? Like, even Christ himself felt forgotten in that moment of like, where I thought we had an agreement here. Like, where are you? And so that experience or that feeling of abandonment or that feeling of nothing's working is a very Christ-like feeling. And it's one that should be expected at various times of life because it is so nurturing and allows you to be sanctified on levels that, are hard to create in any other way. And that's why we came here, is to experience these things that God could not have done in his laboratory and just sort of given it to us or waved his magic wand and given it to us. He needed us to be in these situations to develop and to hang on and to really lean into that faith so that we could develop as individuals.
And you talk about that refining process, and we all want to be refined. We're not big fans of the process that God uses to do that. Can you, standing where you are now in your life, looking back, can you name something that you've learned in life the hard way?
Oh, the hard way. I mean, I think it was, like I mentioned, that college experience, just, when I was showing up for somebody else's reasons, like there was no other reason I was going to college. Like I majored and graduated in business marketing, but mainly because I didn't know what else to do, And so, and even starting that mission, like I was doing it for so many other people's reasons. And that's sort of when God broke me down and said, now I wanted you to find your reason of why you're doing this or learn more about yourself. So, that's where my mind goes is, and just engaging in these, stepping out of the comfort zone. Like those are the moments where, man, if I go back, I maybe would coach myself differently, but in those moments, that's when, it's just like lean into that because there's some growth opportunity here, but it's going to hurt a little bit.
I love the idea of leaning into it. I think maybe, well, first of all, I want to go back to something you said about the prayers, because I think that's super interesting because, there's a lot of people that we've talked to. In fact, we talked to someone the other day that said, I was in this desperate situation and I turned to prayer, right? That was sort of the desperation move. And then through that process, realized that, hey, this has been here all along. I just sort of buried this by my choices, right? And maybe restricted access to that by my own doing. And I'm curious because there's a lot of people that struggle with the idea of if I'm in need of X and I don't get X, then where is God in the picture?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a big fallacy that we can fall into. This is where we see heaven as a big gumball machine, right? Like, okay, listen, I keep putting in these quarters, like of behaviors, like where you at, I've heard that. Even this week, I heard somebody tell this story of paying tithing and the check shows up in the mail. Like I get these things happen, but I don't necessarily, even if they do happen, I don't necessarily think the dots connect to your behaviors. I think it is 100% every time grace of Christ of why that blessings comes. Right. And so I remember running that web development company, I was sort of the sales guy. I'd go out and drum up new business and find new businesses to help. And I remember there's this one instance where, several times this happened where people would just call me like, hey, I need a website. Like, where do I sign? Let's get started. Right. And then they would just suddenly we have new business. And then there's other times where I'm like visiting this client, this prospect over and over. I'm bringing him, brownies and muffins, and hey, remember me? I was just in the area, stopped by, and just working so hard. And then finally, like after a year, he signs that dotted line. Well, so does one come from grace and one come from God? No, they all come from God. Right. And, but yeah, if we get in this, man, and I see so many lives just sort of torn down by this thinking is, hey, I did everything. I jumped through the hoops. I kept the commandments. I married in the temple, and now my husband's addicted to porn. And now he's stepping like and then that marriage falls apart along with their faith and conviction. And it's just not a helpful place to be. And so I'm very much more cautious as I'm articulating my faith and talking about my testimony of this. There's no magic equation of be really good consistently equals happiness and blessings. Like, no. Like every happiness and blessings that comes to you is purely the grace of Jesus Christ that he's bestowed upon you, because like we learned the rain falls upon the righteous and the evil. Like it's just the way this mortality works. And so to me, it's more of like stepping back and saying, it's that routine of surrender. Like I just give it all to you. Like I don't expect anything in return. I mean, because you've already given me so much. Like you gave me salvation. Like you gave me opportunity for, exaltation. Like I don't need anything else. And so I'm just going to take everything as what can I learn from this, and that may be even another simplistic way to look at it, but it's definitely the more we can get away from that, the big gumball machine in the sky is going to not lead to so much heartbreak between you and God.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
I do love the idea of heaven having gumball machines, though. I'm addicted to gumball.
Well, I do like gumballs. Yeah, as a matter of fact.
Free play gumball, right? Yeah. No coins. You just turn.
And there it goes.
That is part of heaven, I think. Yeah. So, but I do, Kurt. I want to go back to something you said earlier. You were talking about your experience on serving a mission, and you said that it taught you about nuance. Right. And you start to see the gospel a little bit differently. I'm curious if you can maybe expound on that a little bit, because I like that idea. I think that there's maybe culturally in the church, right, there's a certain amount of expectation that we place on ourselves. There's a certain amount of an idea that there's a mold that we have to fit within in order to be in good standing, maybe for lack of a better, phrase, but can you talk a little bit about that idea of nuance and where that comes from?
Yeah. So, and I wouldn't necessarily say I discovered that necessarily on my mission. I mean, because the mission is a obviously very structured, formal experience, right? That, sure. And there's a lot of emphasis on obedience, and this is where, again, culture can creep in, because we, again, can build this paradigm that like, oh, if I'm really obedient, good things happen. Baptisms happen as a missionary if I'm really obedient. But I think there's something completely different to learn in that experience with obedience. And so coming home from my mission and that early, getting married, and I sort of was in that place of like, oh, A plus B equals C, and I just need to do these things. And those that are having a rough life, that's because they're not engaged in gospel algebra. And if they only knew how to do gospel algebra, then it would be all good. But then later in life, just realizing and that's the beauty of that, a blessing of the podcast, of meeting so many people, sitting down and hearing stories, you begin to see like, oh, like it doesn't work out for everybody like it worked out for me. Maybe I shouldn't take so much credit as why my life is going so good, and maybe I should give that credit to God and so forth. And so it was more of like just that exposure of other lives, others' trials, others' wrestles with the truth. I mean, I can sit down with somebody. I mean, we did a whole virtual conference about called Questioning Saints, all about individuals who are ministering to individuals who begin to question their faith, and hearing these stories. And my mind goes to when I served as bishop, my last second counselor, we were in a very transient area. So I think I had about 7 counselors by the time I was done. And my last second counselor, he left the church while he was in my bishopric. And I actually sat down and interviewed him for my podcast. And we just had like a friend-to-friend discussion. And just to see like, and hear him articulate his faith journey. Like I couldn't relate to it totally, just because I'm like, why? Like, it's so easy to hear these things that people struggle and be like, why is that a big deal to you? But for him, he's like aching inside and like, and finding new depths of depression because of these wrestles. Right. And so I walked away from that discussion so much, with a better perspective on why people wrestle. And now I can offer more empathy because I better understand some of these things. So I think it was definitely just my journey with leading saints of sitting down with people, hearing stories, jumping into the issues of others' faith journeys and being like, oh, wow, I can see. I don't know why it doesn't impact me as it impacts you, but I can see why that would be very difficult.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me think of, having that conversation, hearing you have that conversation with your friend who left the church makes me think of that ladder of inference, right? And how sometimes we don't have all the facts, right? Or we make meaning out of things that maybe weren't intended to be meant the way that we're making them. And then we rush to assumptions. Those assumptions lead to conclusions. And then we're acting on conclusions that we've made up in our brains.
Right.
And I think we do that. We do that as a culture. We do that as individuals. We do that in our wards and our stakes. We hear things and it's like right up the ladder. But taking time to be intentional and be curious and have conversation and actually get more information helps us come down off that ladder, right? Helps us lower that. And we're coming from a place where now we can love. Now we can empathize with people, and we can be compassionate even, right? So it's not just empathy. It's like, hey, not only do I feel it, I'm moved to do something about it, right?
Right.
But we do, I mean, that ladder of inference, that's a thing. Like that only happens to those people up there with the non-parted hair in Roseville, California, right? It's everywhere in the world.
Although that's a pretty good assumption.
It's a human condition. And I love the idea of this podcast has taught us the power of conversation, but actually, and I believe honestly that there is an adversarial force in the world that doesn't want us talking to each other.
Yep.
That wants us building up walls and fences and dividing and keeping us, keeping us perfectly content with our assumptions, perfectly content with biases. And I think that by truly approaching people and saying, hey, let's talk about where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Help me see it your way. I love that. That's props to you. I do have a question though.
Okay. Yeah.
We of course, Tyler, we don't have favorite guests. We love all of our guests. But Kurt, as you look over this experience that you've had with leading saints, does a particular guest or a particular experience stand out when you look at the nuanced views that podcast experience has given you?
When people ask me that question, what's your favorite episode you've done, or I often go to that episode with my friend Heath, who was in my bishopric, just because it was so raw and real, and I gained so much from that personally. But as far as like the topic of nuance, talking with, even former leaders who thought they had it all figured out and didn't, and then to see him wrestle with doubt, and just to know like, hey man, it's like, there's nothing wrong with you by experiencing this. This is sort of part of your journey, and we can figure this out. And other than that, I'm trying to think of, we did a whole summit around, like I mentioned, the Questioning Saints Summit, and, interviewing people like Anthony Sweat, who's a BYU professor, and he's talking about the concept of ambiguity in doctrine, in the gospel, and how that plays such an important role. That's another one that comes to mind. And, and I've had, there's been individuals who, their faith journey's taken them elsewhere, that, I interview them one time and they're talking with more conviction around things. And, next time I see them, maybe they're in a different spot, but to me, I just try and have an open heart for these people and acceptance and love and encouragement and see what we can learn from all these journeys. So,
well, I stole a page out of your playbook. I was listening to an episode and you were, something I think that came out of your mouth was, simply rejoicing with others, maybe not, of our denomination, but rejoicing with others, in Christ.
Yeah.
And we recently had a stake conference, and the theme of the stake conference was, trying to establish that culture of Christ. And I'm curious, Kurt, like what do you see? Like, how can we keep centered on the gospel of Jesus Christ? There's a lot of distractions, and in 2021, we can get, you mentioned that word nuance. We can get doctorates in nuances.
Yeah.
We can go learn anything we want to learn about any aspect of the church, history of the church. How can we keep the main thing, and work to truly rejoice and develop that culture of Christ?
Yeah. So with this concept of culture is really fascinating, and obviously working and interviewing people in the world of leadership, like culture comes up a lot, right? And
eat strategy for lunch, right?
That's right. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And maybe if there's some left over, they eat it for lunch. So, there's I forget, man, his name slips me at the top of my head, but there's a business thought leader that said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have all the strategy in the world as a company, and it may be really good strategy, but if you have poor culture, like, it doesn't even matter. It will never see the light of day or reach your goals because of that. And I truly believe that, tweaking that doctrine culture eats doctrine for breakfast, because we have remarkable doctrine. Like, I will be the first in line to say that, like, our doctrine is remarkable, and it is dynamic. It's in depth. It's fun to study. And a lot of people who maybe begin to wrestle with doubt, they sort of go to that doctrine, or they go to the history or whatever, and they sort of try and find, like, if I can just connect the dots with doctrine, that'll be it. Or we, I'm making a list of quotes said by general authorities that get taken out of context so many times and used in bad ways that I wish they just never said them. And one of them is from Elder Packer that, and you'll have to help me with the details, but the doctrine the study of doctrine will do more to change the behaviors of man than the study of behavior will change the behavior, right? And so people are like, oh, no, like, what we just need to do is focus on the doctrine. And yes, I mean, in theory, we need to focus on the doctrine. But if it's done so in a soup of negative culture, it's never going to work. Like, it doesn't matter how hard you testify, or it doesn't matter if Joseph Smith was who he said was. It doesn't matter all these things if your culture is not there to prop that up and help you consume that doctrine. And so, and this term culture has sort of turned into this boogeyman term. Like, we throw it around like, oh, it's the culture. This culture is the problem. But when people say that, like, nobody really knows what that means. And so I boiled it down to, like, there's four reasons for negative culture. And if we can understand these four reasons, and there may be additional ones by him, these are the ones that I could only think of. So, but four reasons of negative culture. And then as we understand this, then we actually have something to do or focus on. And so the first one is lack of ability, skill set. If there's a lack of skill set, as far as, whether it's a leader or any Latter-day Saint or any person, any culture, you may have the doctrine, you may have the complete doctrine, but if you don't know how to, run a meeting, how to teach, if you don't know how to sit down with somebody and empathize with them, if you don't know how to do all these skill sets, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to establish a positive culture. And so that's really what we try and accomplish with Leading Saints, is we address skill sets. And we talk about principles that lead to skill sets. And we just did fantastic, Louis Hamner, just a former bishop, did a fantastic presentation all about empathy and how to actually learn empathy, because it's not something that you're just empathic just because you're born that way. You actually, it's a skill set that one can learn and apply, and it takes practice. And so if a leader has not going through that process, people aren't going to feel safe there and so forth. So the first one being lack of ability. The second one is mindset. It's so easy to get into a closed mindset or get into a limited mindset where research and studies show that growth mindset is so much good comes from people who are in a growth mindset, who are looking outside the box, who are considering the nuances of every situation. It's very easy as a leader to get into a black and white mentality, like, oh, well, the handbook says it to do this way, so we got to do it that way, even if people are offended or whatnot, right? I truly don't believe the handbook was used necessarily, it was meant for that way. But we can just get in these black and white mentalities of like I'm just going to have a closed mindset here. I'm not going to look for any other way. But we've interviewed Ryan Goffredson, who's done remarkable work and research all around this concept of mindset and how it's a skill set as well. Sort of ties into that, the lack of ability that you can learn how to have an open mindset, a growth mindset, and that's going to perpetuate good culture. And then the last two is misunderstanding doctrine. Ties into that doctrine concept that if we don't understand the doctrine, if we start, like you mentioned, we have this magical thinking like, oh, well, going back to I talk about the gospel algebra. Like if we think that the gospel is like a math equation,
right,
then we're misunderstanding doctrine, and that's going to perpetuate negative culture. And then the last one is just lack of exposure. If you haven't sat down with somebody who is in the LGBTQ circles, like you're never going to get to a point where you even begin to understand that dynamic, right?
Yeah.
We can talk about us and them all day long, and that's only going to perpetuate negative culture. And so I break it down in these 4 areas because it's so easy as we throw around this concept of culture to default to judgment. Like, oh, well, it's the bishop's fault. Like if he just didn't perpetuate this negative culture, things would go much better, or it's the church's fault, or it's whatever. It's we have a bad neighborhood, and that's what it is. But this is a much more helpful approach of being like, no, actually, maybe the bishop just doesn't have the skill set that other bishops have. And that brings, you kind of feel sympathy for him. Like, okay, I can be patient with him because I know he's learning and I'm learning, and maybe we can figure this out together, rather than, folding your arms in the back of the room and saying, well, I don't know this. I'll just wait till there's a change of guard here because this isn't working. So culture is a very interesting thing because it is everywhere. And if we don't get the culture right, we never give people a chance to really understand the doctrine and embrace the doctrine.
Well, I love the thinking of the misunderstood doctrine. And you mentioned grace earlier. And, for those of us that have members or friends that are members of other churches, this one comes up all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't want to knock Nephi, right? But like there is that verse in Second Nephi chapter 25. You're right that we're saved by grace after all we can do.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with people because people will hang on this. You Mormons, you members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are trying to save yourselves. You're trying to do the work when Christ is already, right? Salvation is there for you. Can you help us understand as far as Kurt Francom speaking for and on behalf of only Kurt Francom.
Right. Yeah,
there we
I
go.
appreciate that.
There's the disclaimer.
What are your thoughts on grace, and how do you unlock the power of grace in your life?
Man, that's there's so much here, and I'll try and be concise and see if we can gain anything out of this. But so, the typical scenario, like in a Sunday school class, in a seminary class, whatever it is, it's like, and how can we better show faith in our life? Or how can we, there's these typical questions that we hear, and the default is what we term the Sunday school answer or the seminary. Oh, read your scriptures, go to church, But I believe that is not the Sunday school answer. I have a new Sunday school answer for everybody. And
Let's go.
Let's break it down right now.
Anytime somebody asks that question, you raise your hand and you say, you first have to realize you are 100% accepted by Jesus Christ. He is completely, absolutely 100% in love with you at this very moment.
Right
and you
now.
could do nothing
Right now.
more
Yeah.
to gain more love. You could do nothing less to gain less. And this is in our path of discipleship. Like, this is where we could begin with everybody. And I actually just, it's Pride Month. And so I wrote this newsletter recently about this concept of accepting our LGBTQ, neighbors, saints, whatever it is. And there's this feeling of, and I always say, I believe grace doesn't have a but. Grace doesn't have a but. It only has a period. So you can say, yeah, we believe in grace, but I mean, Kurt, let's make sure like we're not condoning anything and doing that thing. Like, no, this is the power of acceptance. And Christ knows this. Our Father in heaven knows this. And this is why he uses it so much. And there's a great quote. I have it up on my wall here by Carl Rogers. It says, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Like, that's the power of acceptance. When we realize Christ accepts us exactly how we are, then we begin to change. And I often draw it out in this pendulum, the swinging pendulum. On one side, we have love, and this unconditional love. And it's as we get pulled towards that love that we build that energy that once it'll swing us back so far into behaviors that's where we get our momentum of actually doing behaviors. It isn't the guilt trips. It's not if you just do these things first, if you check these boxes first, then maybe you're worthy. Then maybe you can have a place in heaven or whatever it is. No, it's the other way that, do you know, you could do nothing different in your life? And man, I've had such a sweet experience with this where I went for months and months just struggling with my scripture study for whatever reason. And I would the guilt sort of sat in. I should be like engaging with the scriptures on a daily basis. Like, that's just the model. That's what you do. But even when I forced myself to sit down, it was like just words on a page. Like, I could get nothing from it. And it began to be very frustrating. Later, I found out, and now with hindsight, that actually God was engaging with my heart and trying to teach me a deeper lesson. And I remember I went to this leadership retreat. It was a non-denominational Christian leadership retreat. And I was sitting there before one of the sessions began, and they had some Christian music going. And I don't even remember what the song was, but it was sort of just a good place to be meditative and consider my life and situation and whatnot. And I remember just having this thought of just wrestling with this, like, man, I can't figure out why I can't get in the scriptures anymore. Like, I used to just love spending time there and cross-referencing and looking up Hebrew words or whatever it is. And I just couldn't get into the rhythm anymore. And man, I had such a special experience where the whisper of God in my ear saying, hey, Kurt, do you know you could never read your scriptures again and I'd still love you? And then it came again, Kurt, you could never read your scriptures again and I'd still love you. And I'm talking about just the grace that poured over me, just really? I'm a former bishop and I've done all these things. I'm supposed to love the scriptures, right? And he's like, no, you could never do it again and I'd still love you. And guess what? That didn't lead me in a journey where I just didn't read the scriptures again. No, it engaged my heart and be like, okay, I just want to engage with you and your love in some way. And maybe I can grow from this. Right. And so, as we, and somebody asked such an interesting question as I posted the newsletter, they replied back, because I talked about the reality is we don't get to choose how other people feel loved by us. We can say yes, of course, son, I love you. I will not come to your same-sex marriage because I would be then condoning it. But yes, I love you. No, he doesn't feel love from you. He's not going to feel love from you. It's actually going to the wedding, sitting here and be like, yeah, you know how I feel about same-sex marriage and whatnot, but I'm here because I just love you. And you could marry, you could be married to this other person, for the rest of your life, and I still love you. I'll still be there. That is when people start to lean in and be like, wait a minute, you accept me for who I am? Well, tell me more about your Jesus. I want to, if you accept me, does he accept me? Right. And so it's the principle of acceptance first. And again, that doesn't mean that you condone or agree with. I hate that I have to even say that, because that's right, where people's minds go. But it's I don't champion their decisions or their sins or whatever it is. but I accept them because God, that's exactly what Jesus Christ does. He accepts sins. Oh, thank you for bringing this to me. I now give you salvation. Oh, more sin. Okay, I'll accept your sin. Here's more salvation, right? And so this concept of grace begins. I mean, everything in the gospel begins with, before you jump into reading your scriptures, going to church, saying your prayers. No. You first have to sit down and say, God accepts me 100%. I could do nothing different for the rest of my life, and he accepts me. And even take it, I mean, here we go. Here come the emails, right? I'm going to take you further off the reservation here. I honestly believe God has zero expectation in you. And people see that like, well, wait a minute, Kurt. Of course he has expectation in us. He has a long list of commandments, and he expects us to keep those commandments. No, he has zero expectation in us. And that's hard for to believe because as a parent, I have lots of expectations for my kids. As a mortal, I just don't see how it all connects. And I want them to go to school. I want to graduate college, go on a mission, marry in the temple, because that's sort of what's worked for me. I have those expectations. But God doesn't have expectation. He has expectancy. And the best way to illustrate this is I was out of town. I was off the grid. I went to a conference that was like in the woods. I was off the grid, had no internet signal, and BYU, this is a couple of years ago when they played Tennessee. And I was really, I'm an avid BYU fan. And I'm like, I'm not going to see the game, but it's all right. I'll record it and I'll watch it later. But I knew that coming out of this and traveling home, it was out of state. So I had a long journey home. I wasn't going to be able to avoid what the score was. So I came off the mountain, looked at my phone on an internet signal, and I saw what the score was. And if you remember this incredible game, BYU wins in overtime. And I looked at the final score, I'm like, holy cow, they won in overtime, right? Well, I still got home and I still watched the game. And it was interesting. I'm sure you've had that experience where you watch a game where you know how it's going to end, and it's different.
I love those, by the way.
Yeah.
When the result is what I want.
Yeah.
I there's nothing actually better than watching something, knowing that, hey, this is going to end okay.
I know, right? Because the drop passes feel different.
Right.
Fumbles feel different. And here we are, Zach Wilson. I mean, bless his heart. It's the end of the fourth quarter and they have like 85 yards to go to score a touchdown. They're down, and 45 or something to go in order to have a chance at a field goal to tie the game. And I'm just thinking, this is crazy. There's less than a minute left. How does this happen? Now, I wasn't worried about maybe they'll actually lose. Maybe I've slipped into some, wormhole and they'll actually lose this. No, I was completely certain. I had expectancy that they would win, right? And sure enough, they march down the field. There's an awesome pass and they kick a field goal. They go into overtime and they win. And it's awesome, right? So this is how God is viewing our experience here in mortality. He has zero expectation, but he has full expectancy because he can sit down and be like, it appears that you're dropping some passes and fumbling some balls. Okay, listen, not necessarily the way I would run that play, but no problem because I sent my son and he completely solved this problem that you're in. And yeah, you keep messing up and wow, you're in the depths of addiction right now. Hey, would you just go talk to my son, turn to him? I have zero expectation of you. You can stay in this rut for as long as it takes. And I'll just be here, encouraging you on, being your cheerleader. Cause I know how the score ends because it actually ended thousands of years ago when my son died on the cross. And so whatever you need to learn here, I'm here, but just go to my son, surrender it to him because you win in the end. And he has full expectancy that he will win. And that to me, when we're in that paradigm, that framework, as we're approaching the gospel, it's oh, I can do that. Okay. So this is actually going to work out for me. Even though my life is falling apart right now and I thought this was a gumball machine, but I guess it's not. I know it's going to work out. I know there's a big gumball somewhere in the eternities that's coming my way. That's called salvation. That's given to me without any quarters put into the machine. Okay, I can do that. I can live in this gospel.
Man, I think that the pendulum thing really helps me because I think the human nature says, okay, well then why obey?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and
why obey? But the idea that God is great. God has a plan for our happiness. Central to that plan is the atonement of his son, Jesus Christ. And when we receive that, we love. we love them, and that love, call it a pendulum swing, call it a magnet, right? Call it a moth to a flame, but we're going to want to be like him.
Yeah. I mean, the more I felt his love, like the more I go up on that pendulum side of love, and I'm like, wow, you love me that much? Like I could never do anything different. You still love me? Like, then I'm just like, give me your commandments. Like, okay, you've told me, like, is there any more I could do? Like, you've asked me to not drink coffee. Like, what if I just stay away from carrots or what? I mean, what else could we do? Because I just want so desperately to be like
quote,
him.
Right? When obedience becomes a quest.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not because I want to earn his love or qualify for him to like me. It's because you can actually become like me. You can learn how to love like I love. And these commandments will show you how to do that. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. Let's do this.
Or these scriptures, right? These scriptures will, hey, as you spend some time in these scriptures, you'll actually learn about him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that analogy of the football game. You know, the expectation versus expectancy. I think that the difficulty, right, is for people to embrace that, right? To embrace that idea that, you know, we attach the shame and the difficult work that comes with repentance or being in it, finding yourself in a tough spot, right? Fumbling the ball or dropping the passes.
Yeah.
And it's embracing that idea that, oh shoot, you know what? This is a bump in the road, a blip on the screen.
Yeah. Cause the reality is we're in a spiritual war. Like there is an adversary and he doesn't, you know, you can throw a flag and he's not going to even pay attention to the flag on the field. Like he's like, I'm after your heart and soul. Like I'm not going to, you know, there's no rules here. Right. So every fumble or incomplete pass, he's going to say that's because you're a bad person. And if you weren't a bad person, then you'd actually figure out how to catch the ball. And just like everybody else does, right? Like he's alienating, he's shaming, and he's trying to steal our heart that way. And so that God can't take us up that pendulum to swing us towards sanctifying behaviors.
Yeah.
What do you say to the person, kind of going off of your experience where you're beating yourself up a little bit about scripture study and we know those are the basics and we're not doing the basics, and why can't you be doing the basics? You've stood up and talked to people about doing the basics. What kind of leader are you, right? What do you say to the person who has a solo guilt trip script?
Yeah. Well, my mind takes me back to just a few months ago. I had a really dear friend who called me and let me know that he was on his way to his stake center for a membership council, right? And his church membership was in question. And, you know, it's easy to be like, hey, you know, don't worry, like just God loves you, whatever. But instead, like I get into a place of that acceptance and love and just be like, hey, do you know that, like, I know you're having a tough time with scripture study, or man, I know like this pornography thing's just like a big struggle in you, but do you know that you could look at that the rest of your life and I'd still be right here? Like, I just would still love you. And you're just my brother. Like, I just want you to feel that from me, because that's a person I want to be. And I know that God's like that. And so whatever it takes, man, like you can mess up another 50 times and you can still call me. Like, I'm just here for you. Right. So getting that motive of offering acceptance, because you're not going to say anything or read a scripture that's going to be like, oh, you know what? I hadn't thought about it that way. Like, they get it. They know the doctrinal, you know, talking points and things like that. But what they're lacking is an understanding of what love and acceptance feels like. And once they feel that, it sort of ignites their system of what, like, yeah, and don't you remember God feels that way about you? And then they're like, oh yeah, okay, I can do this. Yeah, I'm really in a tough spot here, but man, thank you. Like, I needed that connection because it reminded me of the connection I can have with God.
No, I love that, because I think there's, you know, look, there's this tendency to have like almost a hierarchy of righteousness, you know, where it's like, well, I'm here and you're here, and if you work harder, you can be here. You know, I was talking to someone a couple months ago, and I just popped in to visit someone at their home, and I was on the front porch, and they said, you know what? Gosh, this whole COVID thing, I'm not keeping the Sabbath day holy. I'm not going to church. I'm not reading my scriptures. I'm not. And it was like almost like this like retching of shame, right? I'm just going to like throw it all at you. And I'm feeling terrible about it. And the reality is like, you know, shoot. Yeah. That seems pretty normal, right?
Yeah.
For where we are right now.
Right.
And I think that if we can get past that idea of wanting to preach the message, right, and just show, I had a conversation yesterday, as a matter of fact, with someone, and they were talking to me about an experience they had with a mutual friend of ours who joined the church. And I said to him, I said, man, what did you do to help him get where he's at now, as joining the church and where he's on his path? And he said, nothing. I was just living life, right? And getting and getting beat up, and just being okay with getting beat up. And this, he just was there at my side seeing this. And I just love that idea that it's just, if you live it, you do it, and we can put ourselves in that position where we step off of the pedestal for a second and come down and just all be on the same level. Cause that's where we're all at. Right.
Yeah. And you mentioned this, there's sort of this hierarchy of righteousness, and there's some structure characteristics of our faith that sort of feed in that way. I don't think that they were created for that intention. But for example, when I served as bishop, my other two brothers were also bishop. So here we are in a family, 4 kids, 3 boys, and all 3 of us are serving as bishops. And I remember there was this lady, I invited my mom to come to church on Mother's Day. We did this, we'd serve pie to the sister. So I invite my mom to come, and the sister sat down next to my wife, or next down to my mother. And she turned to her and said, how did you do it? How did you raise 3 boys to become bishops? Right. And it's like, she's like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't know. Like, this has just happened. It's sort of the biggest fluke in the history of church. I don't know. Right. And, but nonetheless, like standing back, like we had this family home meeting with my extended family, all my nieces and nephews, because I sort of step in their shoes, like being a nephew in a house or in a family where my father and 2 of my uncles are bishops. Like, it's sort of, you can get this impression of like, this is what you've got to do. Okay. Like, if you're not a bishop, like if you're not living according to the gospel algebra here, and you're not becoming a bishop, like something's wrong. Right. And so I remember I just sort of sat in that space and then talked with them and said, hey, did you know, like, there were several occasions when I was a youth that I had to go to my bishop and I confessed several things to that bishop, and just to see that sort of that defense come down, like, wait, like you did that? Like, yeah, like I messed up a lot. Right. And so like normalizing some of these things and being vulnerable maybe breaks down that hierarchy of righteousness, because it is sort of perpetual. Like it's, and I mean, when there's so much of this feeling of like, okay, they're organizing a new bishopric, like let's clear the program and we're going to hear from every person and their wife. Like, I just hate that kind of stuff, because it sort of perpetuates this thing. Like, hey, you guys realize like you didn't earn an award here. Like, none of you applied for this job. Like, don't feed into this. But we'll never get rid of negative aspiring until we get rid of pedestals, and that's a tough thing to do, because there are real priesthood keys that are given to men to lead, and it's remarkable. But maybe we could avoid the pedestal thing, because it sort of feeds into this hierarchy of leadership or righteousness, right?
Right.
And it's in the water.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, we recently had in our state conference, we recently had a person speak. I asked a person just joined the church, right?
Yeah.
To share some thoughts, and his opening remarks was that, when I got the call from Brother Freeman, I thought he had the wrong guy, because surely there were a lot more worthy people
right
in the stake. And then he closed with like, it was so good to be with, these great worthy people that are, part of our program today. And so when he was done, I went up and hugged him, and it was great hearing from him. And then it's like, hey, just to clarify a point of doctrine here.
Yeah. Right.
Like, it's not that.
Right.
There's not, it's not like, it's almost like people are expecting wattage, like a light bulb watt. Right. And I could look out on the congregation and, oh, this guy's really bright, or, oh, this guy's right. We're all kicked in the shorts, limping into church, trying to renew our covenants to keep this thing going another week. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah. I remember being released as a bishop, and the new bishop asking, what's the advice you would give me? And I said, don't buy into the hype. right? You are just a guy sitting at a desk who's helping people get where they need to be while you're on the path with them. Like that's the journey, right? That we're all in this together. We're mucking through the mud and we're getting there together. And that's the journey.
Yeah. As I've interviewed,
when it wasn't Elder Francom, it wasn't Bishop Gould.
Right.
It's, can I point you to the Savior?
Yeah.
Right.
It.
Yeah. And after, as I interview various leaders, like sometimes I'll hear these stories of like, well, I had this deep impression that I was going to be called as the stake president or as the bishop or whatever. And I'm like, okay, like that may be true, but don't tell anybody that, because the minute you say that from the lectern, I guarantee you there's 30 other guys who had the same impression. And that doesn't help. That feeds into this pedestal thing. Right. And so the reality is impression or not, whatever, like, I think there's these we can maybe reapproach some of these, what we consider doctrine, where instead of honoring the men, like let's honor the keys. Like that's a remarkable thing. Like God has restored keys, and check out what these keys can do. These priesthood keys, not what these men can do. Right. And so
when we understand how they need to be worked, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We
and
take
again,
those keys and we plug them into some culture that's hierarchical or egotistical, then we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's, man, and again, these are these cultural points of misunderstanding doctrine, right?
Right.
Or,
I'm right where, in my personal reading, I'm right where Nephi gets that opportunity to clarify the dream of his father, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, the angel comes and says, do you understand the condescension of God? And Nephi's like, I am paraphrasing, but like, I have no idea what you said. But I know God loves his children.
Yeah.
And really, in the end, wouldn't that be awesome? I'd go to that church, and I'll tell you this, we do have our doctrine is beautiful, and our doctrine is full, right? It is the full dispensation of the fullness of times, and we do have priesthood keys, and things have been restored to the earth through miraculous things and beautiful, amazing things in our history, ugly things too. Yeah. But we do not have a monopoly on charity. We do not have a monopoly on the culture of Christ. We could go into churches that are not ours and feel as much, if not more, love. And we can go into places where they have everything revealed under heaven and there's no love.
Yeah.
Right. So
we got to capture it all.
Yeah. We need to start there. And really, when it comes down to it, if you don't have charity, right, you're tinkling brass. You're nothing.
Yeah.
So
love it.
Love that. Love that. When you're rocking the name tag in Sacramento and you're thinking about being however old you are.
39.
Okay. Are you living the life that you thought you would be living when you were 20? And if not, talk to me about maybe what you thought you would be and how it's different.
Yeah, I am galaxies away from what I thought I'd be doing at this age. When I, growing up, I had this deep, this deep dream and passion that I was determined to be a Disney animator. And so I started college off with this intention of I'm going into art. I'm going to go into illustration. I'm going to make it to the big schools in California that teach all these guys how to animate. And God stepped in and said, oh, let me show you this plan over here. I mean, I think you'll really like it. And it was very apparent about year 2 in college that I was not keeping up with the pack as far as drawing skills and ability that way. And so, but I was always had this intrigue in business and marketing and, the creative aspect of that. And so when I transferred to the U, I went to the business school there and graduated in marketing. And there I didn't know where I'd go. And then, I'm in this YSA ward, having my first experience as a leader, as an elders quorum president, and then serve as, in the bishopric and the high priest group leader. Then I became the bishop and then a stake presidency. And so this sort of became my journey where I was just like, man, none of us have a clue what to do around here. I don't mean to be so trite, but it's like, man, we should really talk about these things. Cause I heard about this other guy in way off wherever ward, and he's doing some cool things and maybe we could learn something. Right. And so it sort of started just sort of this hobby of like, I really enjoy these organizational behavior books I'm reading. And now I'm blogging about it. I'm learning so much. And then that sort of just launched me on this trajectory so far away from the Disney studios. But maybe someday I have this dream of like retiring early. I don't know how I'm going to get rich from running a nonprofit, but retiring early and then being like, okay, now I'm going to like dedicate my life to drawing and figure out how to animate, but probably not going to happen. But yeah, so I'm so far away from where I thought it'd be, but man, I got the coolest job in the world. I mean, I literally get to wake up and talk about leadership, interview remarkable people, learn things. And my life has been so enriched. Like, I'm so glad I, at some point, surrendered all that to God and be like, okay, I'll just hop on your bus and you tell me where I'm going.
So what advice, that might be it, but what advice would you say? We do have some youngins in our audience. What advice would you have for people that are struggling with the age-old question, what am I going to do when I grow up?
Oh, man. So are you guys familiar with John Eldredge, his work, like Wild at Heart? You guys got to read this book, okay?
No,
this is your homework.
Yeah, okay.
You need to read Wild at Heart, okay, by John Eldredge. He's an evangelical guy. So there's some doctrine points you sort of have to swim past, but for the most part, it's a phenomenal book. And it basically talks about the core desires of a man's heart, which are a battle to fight, an adventure to live, and a beauty to love. And as you sit with these, like, this is where, if we're talking in the context of men, like, regardless of who you are, trying to figure out what it is you want to do in life, like, you first have to determine, what's my battle? Like, do I have something that I'm actually fighting for? Like, is my heart being engaged in a battle that is worth fighting? Or am I just sort of numbing out with video games, or numbing out with porn, or numbing out, whatever list of vices you can create, right? Men need a battle to fight. And then they need an adventure to live, right? Whether that's a weekend warrior, I go camping, skydiving. I love, if I'm fishing, like, that's my adventure. Like, you need adventure. You need to step into something. And then a beauty to love is obvious. But going back to that adventure to live, like we are following a pattern of God, which is a pretty remarkable story. And we all have a larger story that we need to step into. Now, that larger story is sometimes, you can see that from my journey. Like, I just struggled through college. Like, I had no clue what I was going to do. I just knew I need a college degree so I can get a job and maybe I'll retire someday, right? But to have a larger story to step into, like, that's where your heart is going to, like, be tugging you towards, right? You really need deep purpose in whatever you do. And that maybe is too woo-woo of an answer, but to step back and say, like, actually, when I feel a little bit uncomfortable and I'm leaning into something, like, that's actually that larger story calling me. And that's God's story. Like, God's story is a larger story, and it is remarkable. And he sent his son to come battle and come and overcome the evil one. And then he was even killed, and then all hope was lost. But wait, he resurrected, right? And so even God's journey is a larger story. And I don't think he created people just go to their job 9 to 5 and go to your kid's soccer game so you can scroll through Instagram and then maybe retire someday. Like, I get that I'm not saying there's anything wrong with 9 to 5 jobs, but you've got to be able to, whatever you lean into, it's got to be a larger story. It's got to be something's like, actually, I'm going to make a difference here, or I'm going to learn something deeper about me. So maybe too woo-woo of an answer, but that's where I think
that's a powerful answer. And I would love to maybe even pick that up off the mic. I can imagine you look at your work now and you're not done.
Oh, no.
Right. And it would be wonderful to even know, where's Leading Saints in 5 years?
Yeah.
Tyler and I talk about where's Richest Men in Town in 5 years. And I think that it is important that I knew I was going to marry the woman I married because I saw that larger story.
Yeah.
I'm in her presence and I'm hanging out with her and I'm like, there's no end here. Like, I don't really see this ending.
Yeah.
And I kind of dig that open road, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That.
And as you like lean into a larger story, oftentimes you think, wow, that's really big. And then you sort of get there and then God says, bigger, think bigger. Right. And he's just constantly leading, because that's the journey of the disciple. That's sanctification, right? Like, he will engage your heart on that journey in ways that you would never understand just sort of getting a secure job just because it's secure and doing it just because your dad did it or whatever, again, nothing wrong with if that's where it takes you, but you've got to maintain the larger story.
Yeah.
Thinking bigger though. That's like when those 70s would come to your mission, right? Like, hey, good job. Double it.
Yeah.
Like, what? You do it.
Yeah. Shout out to Toby Crawford. Shout out to Toby Crawford with the mention of the 70s in there. But, Kurt, what gives you hope these days?
Oh man. I mean, it's always the grace of Jesus. Like when I feel that full acceptance, I'm just like, okay, you mean I can do another day. Like if you accept me here, like, okay, I'll lean into that. Right. And that's the beauty of, in our faith tradition, sometimes we just have such a hard time sitting with grace, like just sitting with it. Don't give me any buts, just periods. And just to be like, like, isn't it awesome? Like the scores are already set. Like God saved us. Like, that's pretty cool. And I wonder what we're going to do tomorrow. Cause he'll still accept me then. And again, it keeps me engaged in the battle and gives me overwhelming amounts of hope when I realize that God just loves me and he has so many plans for me and he wants to engage with my heart through his covenants and commandments.
Wow. Well, Kurt, it sounds like you've been raised by some goodly parents. How do you honor your mom and dad today?
Oh man, there is this feeling of, I just want my parents, and this is sort of, we project this on God as well. Like, I just want my parents to know that like they created something that's actually doing some good in the world, and it doesn't have to be a dynamic podcast and, a big following, or like, it's just like, I wake up every day and I just engage in the gospel and my faith. And I love those moments where I can sort of invite my parents on for the journey or talk with them and just, in dialogue with them as far as like what I'm doing and who I'm meeting, and just as a message of like, thank you for just like, like waking up every day and having that stable job and just, doing the little things so that I could have a life that gives me this opportunity, because it's remarkable.
Is there anyone at this stage in your life and with this little platform that we have that you would like to honor in your time with us today? Anyone else?
In my journey, like I mentioned, I just get the opportunity to talk with so many people with so many diverse backgrounds and approaches to faith and whatnot. And my journey with those who have really struggled with addiction has led me to this circle of friends, Steve Shields, James Wilhite, man, I could go on and on, the Steve Petroff. I mean, so many of these guys who have struggled in these areas, and just seeing how God has reached them with his grace and seeing them like, that's sort of right now in this season of my life, like engaging with them and man, I see a deeper level of faith that makes me want to reach deeper for that same similar faith and testimony of just like these guys, their journey has been so different than mine, but to see them end up with Christ and his grace is just, that's really been inspiring for me.
Well, I can relate to so many things that you're sharing just in our experiences and having conversations just like we have had tonight. As I sit down with you and I hear that list of people that you're honoring, I think of the guests that we've had, Tyler, and I think of the stories and the vulnerability. And I will say that one of the things that we've learned is that the more different we might think we are, as we sit down with people, we realize that the game is the same.
Yeah.
That faith and conversion and discipleship and these things are the same, and they're beautifully simple. They're not easy. Not easy, but they are beautifully simple in their design. Very few moving parts, right? In times of turmoil and strife and stress and storm, it is as simple as, Tyler shared that experience earlier with that person who, that instinct to pray had just been buried by choices, but it really is that easy. And so for folks that are listening, we definitely want to point them your way, right? We definitely want to point people towards leading saints. It's a podcast, but it's more than that. It is a community. How can people connect, Kurt, with your work before we wrap up our time together?
Yeah, well, I'd say any place you're listening to this podcast, you can go to the search bar and type in Leading Saints, and you'll find a reddish logo there that you can subscribe to as well, and jump in there. On our website at leadingsaints.org, we have, we always keep this updated, but the 6 most downloaded episodes, that's a good starting point. So you can go there and find some good content to start with to get a flavor of what we offer through the podcast and through the platform. And then, I send out there's lots of people that send out a newsletter, but I really put a lot of thought into my weekly newsletter and write a message of sometimes referencing many of the concepts I've done in our recording today. And so if they want more of that content, they can subscribe to the newsletter, and they'll get a weekly message of my random thinking. And it's fun to look back on something I wrote a year ago and be like, I completely disagree with you, but it's a fun, vulnerable message. So
yeah. I love the way you think. I love the way that your faith is active in your life. And we warned you, Kurt. We warned you. Come on, it's going to be 2 hours, right? So here
I was ready.
Here we are, man.
Here we are, drawing to a close, and we referenced that movie "It's a Wonderful Life," and at the end, we love that scene where George Bailey's on the bridge, and he just wants it all back. All of the imperfections, all the mess, all the missing $8,000. He wants it all back, and he just wants to live again. And he offers a simple prayer, and then miracles happen, and he's rushed into a home, and family and friends come to his rescue. And then his little brother, Harry Bailey, comes home, and he raises a glass to George and toasts George Bailey as the richest man in town. And Tyler and I love that. We love the irony, right? We love everything about that moment. And we end every episode of this podcast with that question to our guests. So Kurt, to you, what does it mean to be considered the richest man in town?
Man, what a great question. For me to be the richest man in town is knowing that I am in my larger story. And there are days, it's not like I'm always there. There are days where I'm just in my email inbox thinking, if only I could get this to inbox 0. And then I'm reminded
that inbox 0 land.
That's right. Does it exist? I don't know. But, it's so easy to sort of fall back in the ruts of life, but to then wake up and be like, wait a minute, like I get to talk to hundreds of thousands of people around the world and share my ideas and talk with remarkable people. Like, and I have turned down some lucrative offers in corporate America and opportunities there, but I'm just like, what more do I want than this? Like, I mean, I need to pay the mortgage and feed the kids and those types of things, but I can get that done. But what an enriching experience to be engaged in the gospel of Jesus Christ and talking with people, building faith, promoting faith, and encouraging people to dive into leadership and find principles there that can sanctify your heart. And so absolutely, I am the richest man in town.
Oh man, I love that question, that answer, Kurt. And I've loved our time together. It's been a ton of fun. I mean, I think we've covered a pretty broad range of topics from vegan potato nachos all the way down to church culture. But it's been fantastic, man. It's been a ton of fun. We definitely want to make sure that our listeners are checking out your work. There's a lot of good things there, and the conversation tonight is a tip of the iceberg. Mike and I are fans of what you do, and we appreciate you taking the time, 2 hours, to come and talk to us tonight. So thanks a ton.
Yeah, no problem. It was a lot of fun.
And Tyler, we got homework, right? Wild at Heart. John
Wild at Heart. Right there.
Go read it. It's so good, guys. So good.
So Kurt, thank you for joining us from a different time zone as well. And I just saw a little kid pop his head in, so it must be bedtime. So we're gonna get
it's almost 10 o'clock, and so there's something going on out there that I maybe need to step in and help.
Yeah, you're gonna have to intervene, man.
But thank you, man. We really did appreciate it, and I hope our listeners get something out of it too, and refreshing thoughts on the gospel that you and I both love. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast. To my big brother George, the richest man in town.